Hi, book people. Another sort of book tag. This one I find really interesting, mostly just because I like the topic. I'm not sure I have like the best answers for a lot of the questions, but this is the 7 Heavenly Virtues and 7 Deadly Sins book edition. And again, I found this tag on ZZ with Books. It's a great website if you're looking for a list of book tags. There's like hundreds on there. But the original creator of this was the Reenchantment of the World blog. So again, I'll put both links. So without further ado, we're going to start with the Heavenly Virtues and then move on to the 7 Deadly Sins. So the first is Chastity, and the question is, which author, book, or series do you wish you had never read? That's kind of hard for me because like I don't, even books I didn't like, I'm never like, oh, I wish I hadn't read that. I mean, part of me wants to say like A Song of Ice and Fire just because I wish I hadn't gotten so attached to the story until like it was done. Like I wish I'd never watched Game of Thrones. I wish I'd never read the books. I wish I had just waited until it was done. And I've kind of been burned so bad that now like I'm very unlikely to start a series if it's not pretty close to done, or if it doesn't have like a consistent publication history. Just because I know it's not the only thing that's ever been delayed that bad, but it's pretty long delays between books. So I guess I don't really wish I'd never read it, but kind of wish I had waited, because now I'm going to have to go back and reread them. All right, so virtue number 2, Temperance. Which book or series did you find so good you didn't want to read it all at once and you read it in doses just to make the pleasure last longer? I think a little bit I'm thinking of Ending Things was like this for me, although I couldn't put it down, but I would kind of just like stop and like reread sentences and just reread parts of it. And The Last House on Needle Street. And I know I talk about those 2 books a lot. I've read more than 2 books, I swear. But they both were the kind of books that I just really wanted to take my time with and enjoy every single page, because I just loved so much about them. All right, Charity. Which book, series, or author do you tirelessly push to others, telling them about it or even giving away spare copies bought for that reason? So obviously, other than those 2 that I was already talking about, I mean, historically, I would just say Catcher in the Rye. Like, I basically push Catcher in the Rye on everybody, especially anyone who hasn't read it. I'm like, oh, what, you haven't read Catcher in the Rye? Here's a copy. And I do have, like, 30 copies or something of it. Some have different covers, and some are just the same, and for this exact reason. So I can, like, regularly have one. Not that I ever go anywhere, but if I did, I can regularly have them available. Diligence. Which series or author do you follow no matter what happens and how long you have to wait? And again, this is going to go back to A Song of Ice and Fire. At this point, I want to finish it, and I want it to be done, and I want to get the rest of the books. I love them, but I'm so frustrated. So I'm going to stick it out because I'm going to read them. I mean, I'm not going to give up. At some point, hopefully we'll get those books or at least get one of them. But yeah, it's very frustrating. Patience. Is there an author, book, or series you've read that improved with time the most, starting out unpromising, but ultimately proving rewarding? For me, it's actually Watchmen, the graphic novel, because I remember I was given the graphic novel, and it was on like Time 100, 100 Best Books or whatever, Time Magazine, and I really just didn't like it. And my husband had read it, and I just kept being like, is this going to get good? Because I'm so bored. And he was like, no, it's amazing. And I could not get into it. I was just so disinterested. I thought it was absolutely just boring nonsense. Like, I didn't understand what the point of it was. And then I don't know what happened, and I don't know what changed, because it didn't really like change content-wise or style. But at some point, it all clicked, like what it was building to. And then I just like flew to the end, and afterwards I was like, okay, I know why this is on Time's top 100 books of all time. So I would definitely say it was that. Like, I stuck it out, and I loved it. So I don't know why I didn't like it to begin with, but it was definitely worth the wait. All right, kindness. Which fictitious character would you consider your role model in the hassle of everyday life? Um, oh, that's a tough one. I would probably say, like, the dad in Book Thief, you know, being so brave, and, like, in Liesel too, like, being able to kind of, and even, I can't remember her friend's name, the boy that she's friends with. Just like the characters are so kind, even though they're in the middle of obviously World War II and, you know, in Germany and all these horrible things happening. So I would say, like, that kind of kindness would be nice to be able to kind of encapsulate in your own life. You know, I sometimes feel like we don't have that kind of, like, community spirit anymore, or willingness to, like, help each other. So I guess that would be a role model. And then the last of the virtues, humility. Which book, series, or author do you find the most underrated? I mean, I would say, like, almost everybody I read. I just don't seem to read, like, the big name books. So I'll be like, oh, I mean, and they're not, like, nobody books, but, like, I love Ian Reid, and I feel like a lot of people don't read him. Or I've really liked Catriona Ward. I like Ruth Ware, and I know she's really popular, but, like, I still don't even know that she's, like, as big as, like, some of the big names. And so I feel like in general, the types of books I read, it's more like, it's less so that the book series and authors are underrated. I just think I read a lot in, like, contemporary fiction, literary fiction, certain kinds of mysteries that I think are just underrated genres. You know, like, a lot of people read sci-fi and fantasy, they read horror, but when I read horror, I read, like, the psychological horror. They'll read mysteries, but they're, like, you know, the sort of, like, detective, like, the long series, you know, the author who has, like, 30 books with the same, like, detective. So I feel like it's just the types of books I read maybe just don't get as much, like, hype. So I guess that would be part of it. So the types of books I feel like in general that I like are underrated. All right, so moving into the 7 deadly sins. Greed. What is the most expensive book that you own, and what is the least expensive book that you own? I don't own a lot of very expensive books, but I do own some very expensive comic books. So probably the most expensive book that I own, that's mine out of, like, our comic collection, because a lot of our comic collection is shared, would be House of Secrets 92, the first Swamp Thing, because that was a gift from me. So, and that's, you know, a very, very expensive comic book. And then least expensive, I mean, most of my books I like to buy books through, like, library book sales or used bookstores where, you know, you get them for a couple bucks. So most of the books that I own are probably, I mean, other than the few that I get, you know, on Amazon new at normal price, I mean, I try to buy a lot of books at, like, $1 or so. So 50 cents, you know, whenever you can do that. Gluttony. What book or books have you shamelessly devoured many times? I mean, Catcher in the Rye, I've read it, like, hundreds of times, so no question there. I read that all the time. What book or book series have you neglected out of sheer laziness? I think it's intimidation more than laziness, but I keep hearing how good Wheel of Time is, and I just keep looking at, like, how many books are in the stack and how long each of them is, and I just kind of go, there's a lot of books I could be reading before I get to those. So I would say it's not really laziness, just, like, balancing, looking at that and going, you know, the amount of time it would take me to read these, I could probably read, like, 30 or 40 books. If actually probably more than that, because I think there's, like, 20 already in the series. So that's my sloth, I guess, is I haven't gotten to the Wheel of Time. Pride. What book or books do you bring up when you want to sound like an intellectual reader? This is a little tough for me because I was an English major and then I was an English teacher. And so I don't do this, like, intentionally. Like, I don't talk about Paradise Lost, or I don't, like, start talking about his dark materials and the allusions to Paradise Lost because I'm trying to sound like, you know, an intellectual. It's just that I have a lot of, I mean, this is what I went to college for, you know, and then I got my master's in this, in literature and, you know, English and writing. And so I don't try to sound like an intellectual reader, but sometimes I feel like I come across as a little pretentious, and I'm not trying to, and I'm not trying to be like, well, here's my intellectual insights. Like, it's not me at all. It just, I'm so used to talking about books in that way. So for Lost, what attributes do you find most attractive in your characters? I mean, it's going to sound funny, but, like, I really am drawn to anti-heroes and unlikable characters. Characters who are difficult, who have challenges, characters who, very morally gray. I don't like, easy to like characters, the characters who are, like, the automatic, obvious heroes. So I like characters who are willing to kind of do things maybe outside the rules, or, that may be like doing things that might be considered immoral in certain circumstances, but for like good reasons. So I just really like complex characters that there's so much you can dig into, like their motivations. And then envy, what books would you most like to receive as a gift? Anything. I love books. So, like, honestly, I'm not like, oh, I really want this one or I need this version. Like, honestly, if someone just gave me a book, I'm happy. Like, I don't even care. Like, you could just be like, here's this book I got for like 50 cents on like the side of the road in some kind of like yard sale. And I'm like, oh, cool, a book. Like, if I haven't read it, I'm excited. And finally, Wrath. What author do you have a love-hate relationship with? I think George R. R. Martin. And not because he kills all the characters off that, you care about. Like, I love that. I love when authors do that. I would say I have a love-hate relationship with him because he will not write his next book, and I really want it. Like, I'm so frustrated, not because, like, and I get it. I know he's, like, built this entire world, and, like, there's so much to dig through, but I'm also worried that, like, I'm never going to see the ending because I'm so excited and so passionate about that book series. So I guess I would say I have a love-hate relationship just because I'm like, George, please write the books. But then I'm also, like, so part of that reason I'm so frustrated and, like, so irritated is because I just love the book series that much. Like, it's just so fantastic. All right, so curious what your thoughts are, like any insights you have. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Bye.